Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill Obrien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill Obrien.
Well, thank you, Agnes, and welcome to this new week of broadcasting here at the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution, and it's the start of a new month. Today is the first day of April in the year 2019, and if you already haven't been warned, be careful, it's April Fool's Day. I'm a little bit, I've been kind of waiting on I sent my tax information, my wife and I sent our tax information to prepare it'll be 3 weeks ago tomorrow. We haven't heard anything yet, so my wife said this morning, I think you better call and check on our taxes. And I said, on April Fool's Day, no way. So I'll call tomorrow. But anyway, it is a pleasure to be with you at the beginning of a new month and the start of a new broadcast week. Let me alert you right now that while I think about it, because I just learned this from Agnes, that we will not be doing a program on Wednesday. We have issues, appointments, and we just will not be able to do it. But the fact that I'm able to give you 2 days notice is encouraging. That usually doesn't happen. So again, let me remind you that on Wednesday, we will be doing a repeat program in the place of the live broadcast. But everything works out well. We should be able to go full blast today and full blast tomorrow. And I'm looking forward to that. This is one of those this, that, and the other programs, which frequently happens after it's been 4 or 5 days between our programs. And things begin to pile up, and I have a stack of papers in front of me here that raise 5 or 6 different issues. And so I'm going to kind of pick through them. Some of them are old, some of them are new, some of them are horrendous. Some of them are, I think, exciting. One of the things, actually 2 of the things that I'd like to share with you today are, I was going to say some old, some new, but in this case, old. And we'll be into it in a moment. But I have a quote that I want to use later. A paragraph or a statement from James Madison. I don't think anybody would be surprised. How many times have I quoted James Madison in the course of the 6 years we've been here on the Virtual Center? But I've been doing some writing. I did quite a bit of writing over the weekend. I'm in the process of trying to put together a class, a course. And it's probably unlike any other higher education class that's been put together, because it's an amalgam of many of the things that I've been saying and writing about for several years. And so it's including, as I'm putting it together, a lot of wrinkles, a lot of things that you don't usually see in a course outline. And so I'm not anywhere near done with it. But at the same time, I had such a good day with it yesterday that last night I really got excited about it, because I began to look back and I said, my heavens, I really got a lot done in a day and a half. So I was really kind of excited about it. So I'm really up on that score today. Let me, first of all, do as I always do, which is to thank you for your continued support of the program and your continued support of the Head On Radio Network. We're into our 7th year of broadcasting. We're 1 month into our 7th year. And I still marvel at what our listeners are able to do for the network and for this program. It's because of you that we stay on the air. I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. And I want you to know how much I look forward to hearing from you, either in email or on occasion when one of our listeners picks up the phone and decides to come on the air with us and join us. Agnes is in the studio today, and if you would like to call and share your thoughts about some of the issues of the day, things that we've been talking about or will be talking about here in the Virtual Center, we would love to hear from you. We have a toll-free number, no charge, from wherever you may call. The number is 844-THE-HORN, 844-843-4676, 844-843-4676. If you dial that number, you'll reach Agnes in the studios. She'll do whatever magic she does, and you'll be on the air. And I want you to know ahead of time that we all look forward to it, not just me, but our other listeners as well. If you'd like to communicate or contact me, but would rather not do it on the air, then you can do so either by sending me an email or by communicating or contacting with me via our Facebook page. If you'd like to send me an email, my email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien, OBRIEN, 906@gmail.com. If you'd prefer to use our Facebook page and make your comment directly to me that way, first of all, I appreciate it, and I also understand that so many of us find ourselves spending so much time on Facebook that might be more convenient and faster, more efficient for you. By all means, feel free to do it. Just go to our page, our Facebook page, and to do that, you just go to Facebook, facebook.com, and in the search box at the top of the home page, type in the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution. That'll get you directly onto our Facebook page. And you'll see a number of postings on that page. And after every posting, there are two computer links. There's a share link and a comment link. If you click on the share link, it sends that particular posting to all of the people, all your friends, on your Facebook account. So that gives us a much wider audience, a much wider spread about the program and about the positions on particular issues that the program takes. If you click on the comment link, it gives you an opportunity to fire a comment directly back to me. It could be about that particular posting, but it need not be, because I'll get an alert on my Facebook page that someone has made a comment on one of the postings on the Facebook page. And then my Facebook will take me directly to that posting and your comment. So if it's about that posting, great. But if it's just a general comment about some other issue, then I'll pick it up right away, and I do appreciate it. However you choose to communicate with us, I want you to know that your ideas, your opinions or suggestions are solicited and are appreciated, as is your continued support for the program and for the network itself. So with that, with those introductions then, and again, let me remind you that we will not be doing a live program on this Wednesday, let me begin to touch on a few issues. There's one issue that I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on, but I did want to share it with you because I thought it was pretty interesting, and I thought that our listeners might think so as well. Last week, my wife received a survey from the National Republican Party Senatorial Committee. And the author, or the chairman of the Republican Senatorial Finance Committee is, I believe, Senator Todd Young. At one point, years ago, my wife was a registered Republican. And somehow, somewhere, they still got her name on their list of Republicans. So consequently, she received this survey, which is a Republican Party assessment, asking for her position on a number of issues. There are 32 questions on this survey. And according to the cover letter from the chairman, the estimates are that it would take between 5 and 10 minutes to respond to all of these questions. And it asks gender and age and name and email address and all the standard things. Did you vote in the 2016 elections? One of the questions, how long have you been identified with the Republican Party? And it gives 4 choices. I'm a lifelong Republican. I've been a Republican for many years. I just recently became a Republican, or other. Now, I don't know exactly what the other might be. Did you vote in 2016? Did you vote in the 2018 midterms? And then it begins to ask specific questions on policy issues. And I wanted to share a few of these with you because I think they're pretty informative. These are economic issue questions. And the first one, and you have to remember that this is a Republican survey, so therefore it's going to be pretty self-congratulatory when it comes to the Republican majority in the Senate and the president, et cetera, et cetera. So the first question, do you believe the middle class income tax rate reductions, part of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, should be made permanent? Yes, no, undecided. And again, it is still referring to this tax cut that President Trump signed in December of 2017 as a middle class tax reduction, even though the data now suggests that the economic growth that this tax cut and the fact that the bulk of the benefits went to the wealthiest 1% and to corporations, the rationale was that this was going to so stimulate the economy that the reduction in tax revenue to the government would be more than compensated for by the economic growth. And now we know that that economic growth never happened. There was a brief spurt, but that has now slowed down. And the fact of the matter is we're going to come nowhere near filling the gap, the deficit gap created by that tax cut. And so now the party, and President Trump specifically, have begun to make overtures towards cutting entitlements, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and the rest. The budget that President Trump said grace over several weeks ago projected an $845 million cut in Medicare benefits over 10 years. And you may remember that during the 26 campaign, President Trump, who did not run as a conservative Republican, remember, made it a strong point that he would never do anything to cut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, or any of the other entitlement programs. And so ultimately he's gone back on that. The next economic issue question. Do you think Barack Obama's government-centric economic policies slowed job growth? Yes, no, undecided. I think you can see the implication of the question. Do you think Barack Obama's government-centric economic policies slowed growth? I think it's pretty telling what the implications of that question are. It's a very leading question for Republicans because, in a sense, it clearly, the very question itself suggests that the answer needs to be yes. Third question, do you support right-to-work laws that ban forced unionism? So clearly these questions are entitled to cultivate policy issues, economic issues that Republicans like to run on. Anti-unionism, right to work. And then the question, going back to the Tax Cut and Jobs Act of 2017. Did you support passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which Republicans passed on a party line vote to cut tax rates, simplify the tax code, and support economic growth in America? The very question implies all the positive things that this tax bill was reputed to be going to do that honestly have not been done. The next question, do you think many federal programs should be shifted to the states or even eliminated? Again, a very leading question. Do you support President Trump's conservative budget outline, which includes eliminating wasteful programs and redundant federal programs? The president's budget, of course, is aimed principally at cutting government expenses in order to reduce the deficit, in order to compensate for the trillion-plus hole in the deficit that the tax cut bill created. Do you support a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution? In other words, what we have in these questions is a rundown of Republican policy issues, one right after the other. Do you think it's a good deal to renegotiate international trade deals to make sure we are leveraging our power in favor of American workers and U.S.-based companies? President Trump, as we know, is renegotiating international trade deals, imposing tariffs, and all the rest of it. By linking his actions to leveraging our power in favor of American workers and U.S.-based companies, I would suggest that's very, very questionable. Generally, is there too much government involvement in our free enterprise system? Again, an extremely leading question. The next one is one that I marked on the survey that I definitely wanted to emphasize today. Do you agree with the way Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has eliminated the filibuster for Supreme Court nominations so we could break through the Democrats' obstructionist tactics and confirm Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh? Translation, are you willing to give a vote of approval for what Mitch McConnell did in order to hold open the Supreme Court seat with the death of Antonin Scalia and pack the Supreme Court with conservative justices? Again, a very leading question, self-serving, to be sure. Do you support Republican efforts to completely root out corruption in the IRS and remove everyone who participated in the IRS campaign to harass conservative groups during the Obama administration? That's an allegation that has been made throughout President Trump's administration. Here's another one that I marked as being a highlight. Are you concerned about the rise in political correctness and left-wing radicalism on America's college campuses, where conservative views are suppressed and conservative speakers are harassed and even attacked? This is background for President Trump's free speech efforts on campuses. This is part of the conservative attack against higher education in this country on the assumption that it leans left. Should we do more to secure our border with Mexico? Should we deport illegal aliens who've been convicted of crimes? Do you believe America must have the strongest military in the world? Are you concerned that Barack Obama's foreign policies damage America's reputation? These questions, taken in one vast collection, pretty much summarize Republican positions on major issues over the last several years. And of course, toward the end of the survey, they ask the person filling out the survey if they're willing to support these goals by making a major contribution. And they offer you a number of options, beginning with $1,000 all the way down to $25. And then it gives a list of 12 issues and asks the completer to select 3 that you believe the Republican Party should focus on. In other words, here's the list. Let us have the big 3, your big 3. Cutting taxes and spending. Cutting taxes and spending. Creating jobs. Education reform, school choice. New protections for unborn children. Maintaining our alliance with Israel. Upholding the Second Amendment. Repealing regulations. Enforcing our borders. Nominating judges who are strict constitutionalists. Protecting Americans against terrorism. Reforming Medicare and Social Security. That's kind of a list of the hottest items that Republicans are eager to get into. And it asks the person who fills out this survey to identify the top 3 of those as being priorities. I think the survey is important for the issues it raises, for the questions it asks. I think it's a wonderful example of a self-serving survey where the questions are loaded with cues that lead you to a particular answer. I thought it was informative. I thought it was interesting. Also, I was a little bit surprised that it came to our home. And so that's why I wanted to share it with you. Like almost everybody, I was, as we do on most Sundays, the Sunday talk shows are pretty predictable. And increasingly, they become bully pulpits for administration policy, where all the minions, White House minions, are sent out to the various network talk shows to defend policy or make the pitch for new policies. Sometimes I watch a few of the shows. Sometimes I don't. Yesterday, the first one that I looked at was on Fox News. It was Chris Wallace's program on Fox Sunday. It's on here at 9 a.m. on Sunday morning. And I started to watch it, and the very first guest was Kellyanne Conway. I became so angry that I had to turn the program off, because Chris Wallace was pushing Kellyanne on this overly optimistic victory lap reading of the Barr summary of the Mueller report, because the Attorney General made it very clear that while he didn't think there was evidence presented in the Mueller report to prove obstruction of justice on the part of the president, it was important to know that the Mueller report does not exonerate the president from obstruction either. In other words, and we talked about this last week, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on it, but in effect, Mueller chose not to reach a conclusion, a recommendation on criminal intent or the evidence of criminal obstruction, even though he lays out evidences on both sides of the issue in the report. And we talked last week about how the Attorney General, William Barr, seemed to seize that opening and move in and offer his own absolution of presidential guilt, when in effect, more and more commentators are beginning to suggest that Mueller's intent in not reaching a conclusion in the report was to leave the issue to Congress. And Barr had short-circuited that invitation by answering the question or resolving the issue himself. And in response to that, as you know, I'm sure, Democrats, the chairman of committees in the House, have been demanding a full release of the Mueller report. The New York Times this morning had an op-ed by Jerry Nadler, in which Nadler was advocating for the release of the entire Mueller report. The Attorney General has promised a redacted version of the Mueller report by the middle of the month or even earlier. I saw a notice this morning, however, that Chairman Adam Schiff of the Intelligence Committee, as well as Jerry Nadler of the Judiciary Committee, are contemplating a vote on their committees for subpoenas being issued for the entire Mueller report. Back to Kellyanne Conway. Chris Wallace was insistent on asking her how the president can continue to interpret Barr's letter, Barr's summary, as a complete exoneration of charges, not only with collusion with the Russians, but also on obstruction of justice, when the Attorney General quotes the Mueller report as saying that in the obstruction area, not reaching a final conclusion in no way exonerates the president from the possibility of guilt. And yet the president continues to insist on total exoneration as a result of the Barr summary. And Chris Wallace kept pushing that and pushing that. Kellyanne Conway continued to dodge and deny until finally I got so angry that I turned it off. Then I went to CNN. CNN had Mick Mulvaney, who's the interim chief of staff for President Trump. And this is the issue, the main issue, that I wanted to open today's program with, because I found this to be astounding, also significant. So if you'll bear with me. Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney on CNN, hosted by Jake Tapper on the State of the Union program on CNN, said Sunday that whether President Trump's campaign's actions regarding Russia were unethical, and I'll get into the background for that in a moment, is not important. What matters is that those actions were not found to be criminal. When pushed by Jake Tapper, and let me go back and explain where the pushing came from. Tapper was responding to House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff's statement that the campaign acted immorally and corruptly with regard to Russia, whether it involved Trump's negotiations over a possible Trump Tower in Russia, former campaign chairman Paul Manafort's sharing of polling data with a Russian associate who law enforcement said is linked to Russian intelligence, or the June 6, 2016 Trump Tower meeting between top campaign officials and Russians who had promised dirt on the 26th presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton. Adam Schiff, in contradiction to William Barr's summary of the Mueller report, went into this long 5-minute harangue. Many of you have probably seen it rebroadcast. It's been broadcast numerous times over the last several days, in which he ran through this litany of events and questionable actions by the president and his administration. And his whole point was, in speaking to Republicans, you may think this is okay, I don't. You may think that that's okay, but I don't. And one of the statements he made is whether, in fact, there's the grounds for criminal prosecution on the issue of collusion or not, and Barr says not. Adam Schiff's statement was that the campaign acted immorally and corruptly in many of these areas. And that's the question that Jake Tapper was putting to acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney. Mulvaney's response, quote, "The issue is not whether it's ethical. Forgetting Adam Schiff for a second, Tapper said, what about the larger point about ethics and morality? Mulvaney's response was as follows. I think the voters are going to decide about the ethics and morality of the people they vote for on either side, Mulvaney said. People liked Bill Clinton, even though they might not have thought that he was very ethical. That's not the job of the House Intelligence Committee. It's not the job of the House Judiciary Committee. It's not the job of the House Oversight Committee. They're supposed to review the functioning of government. Voters make decisions about candidates in other places. I almost jumped through the television screen in response to that. It's not the job of the House Intelligence Committee. It's not the job of the House Judiciary Committee. It's not the job of the House Oversight Committee. Fact is, it damn well is their job. Because these investigatory committees are the ones that pull together the evidence, issue the subpoenas, and interview the participants in order to establish grounds for impeachment, which is a constitutional responsibility of the House of Representatives. The Senate votes guilty or innocent, but the House impeaches. So it damn well is the job of these House committees to evaluate issues of ethics and morality. And that brings us to the point of all of this, I believe. There's absolutely no question when you look at Mulvaney's testimony before television cameras on CNN yesterday in the interview with Jake Tapper. When Mulvaney replies that ethics and morality are not the issue, criminality is. That is a political strategy. We talked about that here on this program several weeks ago. Impeachment does not require violation of the law. It does not require proof of criminal behavior. But President Trump, for a long time, and now Mulvaney and other members of his administration, continue to separate the issues of ethics and morality from criminality. And what they have chosen to do clearly is emphasize the criminality issue only. That is a strategy, because the founders were very careful in crafting the impeachment clause of the Constitution. Bribery, treason, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, to make it a point that the impeachment of a president or a court justice, I might add, is a political act, not a legal one. It does not require criminal activity, even though Mulvaney yesterday insisted that it does, when he said ethics and morality don't count. They damn well do count. They count a lot. But what we're seeing is an effort by the administration to shift the conversation totally into the issue of proven criminal behavior. The emphasis on the Mueller report, the emphasis on Barr's summary of the Mueller report, continue to focus on the issue of proven criminal behavior. Criminal collusion, conspiracy with the Russians. Barr said that he didn't see in the Mueller report evidence of criminal behavior. But if you think about that long list that Adam Schiff put together last week of things that you may think is okay, but I don't. What Schiff is doing is bringing the conversation back out of the legal criminal realm, back into the ethics and morality realm, which is the basis of impeachment. I'm not saying that the House should push for impeachment of the president. What I am saying is it's very clear that the administration is afraid that's going to happen. So what they continue to do is push the criminal side of the issue, the legal side, because they are on a PR campaign to convince the general public that if you can't prove the president committed a crime, then he's fully exonerated. He damn well is not. None of the behavior that the president or his campaign engaged in was ethically or morally sound. It was suspicious. It came close to criminal activity. And that's exactly what Mulvaney said yesterday. The voters are going to decide about the issues of ethics and morality when they go to the polls. These House committees are supposed to review government operations. Voters make decisions about the candidates in other places. They don't. The House of Representatives makes decisions about the ethical and moral behavior of the President of the United States and his appointees, because they can impeach for ethical and moral violations, whether in fact they're criminal or not. James Madison himself, in the Federalist Papers, made very specifically, impeachment is a political issue, not a legal one. They are trying to bend the conversation toward the criminal realm because they know damn well that what the president has done, as Adam Schiff has said, is unethical, immoral, improper, and probably impeachable. They know that. But politically, the issue of impeachment right now, and I think Nancy Pelosi has pretty well done this, is off the table as the election of 2020 moves closer and closer. Because you could never bring an impeachment situation to fruition now by the time the election was held. Not only that, but the Republican Party controls the Senate, which means that even if you did impeach, a Republican-controlled Senate would never issue a guilty verdict. But after 2020, if Democrats are able to win control of the Senate, which they have a much better chance to do than they did in the midterms of 2018 because there are more Republicans up for re-election than there were in 2018. Then, if President Trump wins a second term in 2020, impeachment suddenly is back on the table. If President Trump doesn't win re-election in 2020, then he's potentially liable criminally for some of the activities and some of the behavior that Mueller apparently has laid out in his report. That's why Mueller didn't reach a conclusion on the obstruction issue. Because this is a congressional responsibility, in spite of the fact that Mick Mulvaney tried to deny that it is. I think that appearance by Mick Mulvaney yesterday on CNN may turn out to be one of the most important interviews through this entire situation. Because when he said that the questions of ethics and morality don't factor into this, only the criminal behavior of the president and his administration does, he is revealing an administration political strategy. We've got to recognize it, can't fall for it. It's very clear that Adam Schiff recognizes it. He knows that the issue is not totally one of criminality. And the fact that the president, in the last 3 or 4 days, has begun to attack Adam Schiff indicates to me that Adam Schiff has touched a very sensitive button when it comes to this administration. We know that this president has demonstrated over and over again that his response when he's hit is to strike back harder. So when the president begins to lash out at an Adam Schiff by calling him unflattering names like pencil neck, to me that is an indication that Adam Schiff has struck a nerve. He's hurt the president, and the president is lashing back at him. In a sense, then, when the president strikes personally, it's evidence that the object of his attack has struck a blow that matters. Clearly, Adam Schiff has. And I think the area where Adam Schiff's blow becomes clear is in the appearance yesterday of Mick Mulvaney on CNN, State of the Union program with Jake Tapper. I think that was one of the most revealing, incriminating appearances that I've seen on any of these shows for a long time. It's very clear that Kellyanne Conway is lying to protect the president. She is asserting total exoneration when even Barr himself wrote that that's not true. The polls are suggesting that the people aren't buying that. President Trump has been taking a victory lap for 3 or 4 days now because of the Barr summary, since it came out a week ago Friday. A week ago yesterday, Sunday evening. The Mueller report was released to Barr a week ago Friday. Barr's summary came out late Sunday, a week ago. Since that time, the president has been claiming complete exoneration and has undertaken victory laps, including the horrendous rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan last Thursday night, in which he chose that forum to attack Adam Schiff. It seems to me that the administration has decided on a strategy. It's a strategy that we revealed weeks ago here, because it was very clear that the administration was trying to push talk of impeachment into the legal realm exclusively, when in fact impeachment is not a legal remedy. it is a political remedy. And when making political allegations of political malfeasance, high crimes and misdemeanors, ethics and morality play big roles in those situations, whatever Mick Mulvaney chooses to claim otherwise. So again, I think this is an important issue. I was really glad that I happened to catch that. I was in a bad mood, a sour mood, after trying to put up with Kellyanne Conway's shenanigans, I guess you could call it, with Chris Wallace. I don't usually watch Fox News that much, but I do try to force myself to do it periodically because we need to know what they're doing and what they're saying. I think recent performances by Tucker Carlson and especially Sean Hannity make it very clear what the president is about, what's going on, what the strategy is. I think Fox News gives the president a bully pulpit, a media outlet that few presidents have in the past ever had. I think this is very, very significant. Let me share one other thing with you during our first hour. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes before we take our break, but I wanted to get into this because there's an article in this morning's New York Times that I wanted to call your attention to. I don't think it's earth-shattering. I don't think it's new. For the most part, it reinforces things that many of us have been saying for some time. But at the same time, I think the theme of this piece by David Lenhart is very revealing. Let me also say that at the close of this piece in this morning's New York Times, David Lenhart announced that he won't be writing a column for several months because he's going to be working on a book. I've gotten to really appreciate David Lenhart's columns of late, the last several weeks. This particular one is about a CEO who just celebrated his 80th birthday, named Peter Georgescu. Peter Georgescu is a refugee from Romania in the late 1930s. He was born just before World War II broke out in Romania, where his father was a businessman, and his mother's father, his maternal grandfather, was a politician who opposed both the Nazis and the communists. Peter Georgescu's parents were traveling in the United States in 1947 when the Iron Curtain came down in Europe. And American officials told them that if they returned home, they would be killed. Consequently, young Peter and his brother were forced to go live with their grandparents on the Romania countryside. Peter was 10 years old. His brother was 15 when the government moved in on them. In the early 1950s, a Romanian diplomat approached Peter's father in New York. Remember, the father and mother had been living in New York because they were unable to go back home in 1947 after the Iron Curtain. A Romanian diplomat approached Peter's father in New York and brought a recent picture of the two brothers, both of them now teenagers, and used this to pressure the father to spy for Romania in the United States. Instead of doing that, Peter's father went to the FBI, and the FBI encouraged him to go public with this clear blackmail attempt because it would make the Soviet Empire look bad. It worked. The two brothers became a sensation in the media. Finally, under President Eisenhower, Romania freed the two brothers and let them come to the United States as part of a prisoner exchange. And this began the Wall Street career of Peter Georgescu. I think this is a fantastic story. From here on, Peter Georgescu's life, according to Lenhart, moved quickly. He was admitted to Phillips Exeter Academy in New England, even though he spoke no English and hadn't attended school for much of his boyhood. He went to college and business school and then took a job with an advertising firm in New York called Young and Rubicam, where he spent 47 years with this ad agency, the last 7 as its chief executive. And this is where the point of the article becomes important. Georgescu, in speaking with David Lenhart, said, "The hero of my life story is America itself." Over and over and over again, Georgescu said, people who didn't know me, who didn't have any reason to care about me, helped me. All of them, he believes, reflected or were influenced by the post-World War II culture that was prevalent in the United States, which fostered a sense of community over individuality. Corporate executives, Georgescu said, didn't pay themselves huge salaries. Workers enjoyed rising wages. Things began to change, Georgescu said, after 1970s. Stakeholder capitalism, which, Georgescu says, optimized the well-being of customers, employees, shareholders, and the nation itself, gave way to short-term shareholder-only capitalism, where all the profits went to the people at the top. Worker salaries were on hold and actually began to drop. Georgescu's conclusion: capitalism is a brilliant factory for prosperity. Brilliant, he said. Yet the version of capitalism we've created here works for only a minority of people. Unquote. Since he retired, Georgescu has been trying to agitate corporate leaders. He's published a book urging them to arise. He's written op-eds. He's given talks. He basically says that if other CEOs like him don't move and take hold of the situation, the whole thing could fall apart. We're not that far off, he told Lenhart. He's not alone. Lenhart points out that Warren Buffett agrees. So does Martin Lipton, Dean of Corporate Lawyers, Lawrence Fink, who runs the investment firm BlackRock. Buffett says there's class warfare going on in this country, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war, and we're winning. But in winning, we're eventually going to lose. That's the message of a refugee, an immigrant, who made it big in this country in capitalism, and is speaking from his own experience about the capitalism as it existed when he came here, as opposed to the version of capitalism that he sees operating now. His conclusion is everything positive about capitalism is on the line. It could all collapse. And he believes in order to save it, capitalists themselves need to unite, rise up, and take back control that they've allowed to slip out of their hands. When I read this article this morning, I thought about the late 19th century. I thought about efforts of prominent capitalists in the late 19th century to do the same thing. When they saw the evils of the Gilded Age, they saw people turning capitalism, which had the potential to benefit citizens, into their own piggy banks that benefited only ruthless, greedy individuals. And they tried to save it. Things like Andrew Carnegie's Gospel of Wealth, in which he made his appeal in the late 1880s, early 1890s, to capitalists themselves, to take back control and put the system back on track. Because he believed, Georgescu believes, that when capitalism is on track, it benefits everybody. He believes that. I don't necessarily believe that. I think capitalism is, in many ways, exploitive. I don't think everybody wins. But I do know, history tells me, that more people usually win than we're seeing win today. Georgescu sees the end of the economic system that made America great if things don't change, and soon. I think this is an incredibly important article. And what makes it incredible is that it's being put together, it's being explained by somebody who lived it, somebody who benefited from it, and now as he looks back on his professional life, realizes that the things that made it for work for me are disappearing. If it could work for me, it can work for other people. But we've got to put the system back on track, is what he's saying. I think it's a powerful, powerful piece. I'm going to miss David Lenhart, to be honest, for a couple of months. He writes some pretty good stuff. And over the several months, I've come to appreciate him more and more. We've reached the top. Actually, we're gone a few minutes beyond the top of the hour. You're listening to the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. We're going to pause and take a short break, 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll be right back with our second hour. I hope you'll stay with us. Thank you.
return to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Here's your host, Dr. Bill Obrien.
Thank you, Agnes, and I apologize for the communication snafu.
I think that's me, Bill. It didn't show up on my chat, so I will check that out.
I've been writing that we were ready, and and then you asked me if everything was all right. I asked you if everything was all right. So.
Oh wow. Okay, so that means I will check my Skype, and here we go.
Okay, here we go. Thank you, Agnes.
You're welcome.
Let's get going with this, our second hour. You're listening to the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility on this April Fool's Day, Monday, the 1st of April in the year 2019. We're into our second hour. We've got about 45 minutes left in this, our second hour. So let's see if we can put it to good use. Before we begin, let me remind you, we will not be doing a live program on Wednesday, but we will be doing a program tomorrow. So again, I think the fact that we can give a couple of days notice of a canceled program, I think is pretty good. So again, we will not be doing a program on this Wednesday. For those of you just joining us, welcome and thank you. I'm not going to take the time because of the abbreviated second hour to give you all of the details of email addresses and Facebook page addresses and all those things. But at the same time, I do invite you to participate in the program if you are so inclined by giving us a call at 1-844-THE-HORN. 1-844-THE-HORN. We'll get you into the studio. Agnes will connect you and get you on the air immediately. I mentioned at the beginning of the first hour the postings on Facebook. This weekend, I put 2 of them on there. And I wanted to, in the second hour, make reference to both. The first one, I think, is particularly important because it has serious political ramifications. If you are a regular listener to the Virtual Center programs, you may recall that some weeks ago, 3 or 4 or 5 weeks ago maybe, Nicholas Kristof wrote an article on the issue of nuclear capabilities and the Saudis. And his concern was that there was serious evidence that had surfaced that the Trump administration, behind closed doors, under the cover of darkness, was sharing nuclear information with the Saudis. Reports were that the Saudis wanted to build nuclear reactors. And the danger was that in building nuclear reactors, that would give them the capability of conducting research in nuclear weaponry. And so Kristof was concerned because the issue tended to suggest a very dangerous trend in this administration. And of course, that was at exactly the time when reaction over the murder and dismembering of the body of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post op-ed writer, was getting attention around the world. And it seemed to Nicholas Kristof a bit questionable that at the same time that the Saudi crown prince was under such worldwide pressure for allegedly having given the go-ahead on the murder of Khashoggi, that the Trump administration would at the same time be sharing sensitive nuclear information with Saudi Arabia? Well, this weekend, that same issue came up again. And no longer is it speculation. It's validated fact, as testified by Energy Secretary Rick Perry, who, if you recall, was the Republican governor in Texas before President Trump appointed him to head up the Energy Department. At the time, there were serious questions about Rick Perry's competence for this position, because there was evidence that Rick Perry didn't even know what the Energy Department did. But he was approved anyway. And most people chalked it up and said, well, he may be not competent for this particular post, but that puts him in good company with everybody else in the Trump administration who seem to have been appointed to positions for which they aren't qualified. Fact of the matter is, since November 2017, the Trump administration has given 7 secret authorizations allowing U.S. nuclear energy companies to share sensitive technological information with Saudi Arabia, even though Saudi Arabia has never agreed to the anti-proliferation terms required in the sharing of such information. The Energy Department and State Department have kept these 7 authorizations from the public, and they have also refused to share information about them with congressional committees who are concerned over nuclear proliferation and safety. There is a provision in what is called Part 810 information, which is a regulatory clause that allows U.S. companies to divulge certain design information when competing for contracts with foreign buyers. The 810 provision permits companies to share certain information, but in return for the sharing of that information, the Saudis have to agree to what is called a 1-2-3 agreement. And when they sign this, they are giving up their right to enrich uranium or to reprocess spent fuel, both of which can be used to build nuclear weapons. The Saudis have refused to agree to the terms of a 1-2-3 agreement. Yet, in spite of that, the administration on 7 different occasions has given U.S. companies permission to share sensitive information with the Saudis. A year ago, on 60 Minutes, the Saudi Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, made the statement, quote, Saudi Arabia does not want to acquire any nuclear bomb. But without a doubt, if Iran developed a nuclear bomb, we will follow suit as soon as possible, unquote. In that statement on 60 Minutes, the Saudi Crown Prince did not deny that the reason the Saudis want to build 2 nuclear reactors is so that they would have the capability for developing a nuclear weapon in case Iran did the same thing. In December, in an email obtained by the Washington Post, the Energy Department under Rick Perry conceded that the general practice is to place signed authorizations in the department under the Freedom of Information Act, the department reading room. The Saudis have never agreed to it. Perry's testimony on Thursday, I said Tuesday, it's Thursday, before the Senate Armed Services Committee, he testified, these U.S. companies that are going to be doing this work want to keep their proprietary information from being out in the public domain. Perry said, I can totally understand that. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that the Saudis will not disclaim their intention to develop nuclear weapon capabilities as part of their effort to build these two nuclear reactors has raised serious questions in Congress. It raises serious questions also about the Trump administration's concern for international security. Again, it speaks to the very unique relationship that the Trump administration has developed with the Saudis. To the point, if you'll recall, that the United States, the Trump administration, was the only major nation that didn't condemn the Saudis for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. I think this is incredibly important information. I think in many ways it's telling. It's frightening. To me, it almost betrays a lack of appreciation for the security and the power of nuclear energy. Unbelievable. That's one of the postings that I put on Facebook this weekend. I will tell you that when I finish the program later today or this evening, I intend to put a posting on Facebook, on our Facebook page, about today's first hour of the program, specifically about the Mulvaney testimony on CNN yesterday when interviewed by Jake Tapper. Because I think the administration's claim that ethics and morality, as far as the administration is concerned, don't matter. Only criminal behavior does. I think that reveals a telling strategy of this administration. I think it's a strategy. It's an issue that needs to be hung out there for everybody to see. Because only when it's public information, when the light of day shines on it, do we begin to see what the administration is doing. It's brilliant political strategy, but it's dangerous political strategy as well. I apologize for the phone ringing. I'm going to have to get rid of the landline. I mean, the robocalls are unbelievable. I get 15 a day, it seems like. So anyway, my wife told me to take the phone off the hook during the program, and I always forget to do it, and I apologize for that. The second issue I'd like to deal with, this is the last posting that I put on Facebook. I put it on there last evening, I think. And it's about something I'm writing. And I wanted to share it with you. It's about a Madison quote that I've shared with you before. But this time around, I went to the letter in which the quoted paragraph appears, and I found the entire letter to be meaningful. It's about universal education, and I think it's very important. So let me share with you the posting, follow it up by an accounting of Madison's letter on this issue of universal education. I begin this, it's not long, but I begin this with a story that's very familiar. And that's the following. On the 17th of September, 1787, when the Constitutional Convention adjourned in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, according to James McHenry of Maryland, who entered this exchange in his diary, when Benjamin Franklin left Independence Hall on September 17th, according to McHenry, he was confronted by a crowd of people outside the hall who were very interested in what had gone on in the hall, because if you remember, the Constitutional Convention was held for the most part in secret. Citizens were very interested in what was going on in there, but they didn't know what was going on in there. Kind of like the Mueller report. Everybody's interested in it. Nobody's seen it, except William Barr so far. According to McHenry, a Philadelphia resident named Mrs. Powell confronted Benjamin Franklin with the following, quote, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Franklin's reply, "A republic if you can keep it." A republic if you can keep it. Which leads us directly to the Madison quote from a letter he wrote in 1822. Who better than James Madison, principal architect of the Republic, to enlighten us on what citizens would have to do in order to sustain the Republic, or, as Franklin said, in order to keep it. In August of 1822, an attorney named William Barry drafted a letter to James Madison. The letter was dated June 30th, 1822. By this time, Madison was retired. He had ceased to be president in 1816. So this was 6 years after he left the presidency. William Barry was a Virginian. He had grown up and gone to William and Mary, where he received his law degree. And then he moved to the Kentucky Territory, became very influential in Kentucky politics, and was involved in helping Kentucky join the Union and achieve statehood. In 2016, William Barry had become lieutenant governor in Kentucky. And he wrote James Madison for advice on trying to get a universal education bill enacted in Kentucky. Madison's letter of August 4th, 1822, was a response to Barry's request for advice. In his response, Madison included the following statement, which we've used here previously on the Virtual Center, which has been quoted in a number of different places because it's so profound and important. Madison wrote the following: a popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Unquote. Let me repeat that quote because it's so rich. It is loaded with insight and information. A popular government, Madison said, without popular information or the means of acquiring that information is but a prologue to farce or tragedy, perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance. A people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives. Unquote. Here's my spin on what Madison is saying. Ignorance, Madison believed, can never sustain popular government. On the contrary, it will destroy it. Popular access to what people need to know is critical, but that's only the first step in the process. Learning, after all, is not a commodity, it's a process. The creation of knowledge is the result of that process. For education to happen, in this case, civic education, which I remind you is part of the name of this particular effort here at the Virtual Center, study of the Constitution and civic responsibility. Civic responsibility requires an educated citizenry. Citizens must seek out and engage the information they encounter. This is important. Citizens must go after the information they need. But gaining the information is not knowledge. It's not education. What they do with that information is education. So therefore, in order to gain knowledge, and Madison says power that knowledge brings, citizens must engage the information. They must massage it. They must understand it. They must evaluate it, analyze it. Only then, Madison suggests, can the necessary results occur. A replacement of ignorance with understanding, and the power needed for self-government, which only knowledge can provide. The way I put it is this way. People power in this republic demands education. Education is a process. It's the product, knowledge is the product of student engagement with content. Content is the subject matter that constitutes what I call the stuff of any curriculum. It causes education to happen. Information is not knowledge. What students do with it is. Only students, citizens, who want to know can fulfill the responsibilities our public imposes upon them. We can remain a popular government only as long as citizens seek to educate themselves, seek the information they need to hold government accountable. When they fall down on the job, when education ceases, we are in danger of losing the republic. That's what Benjamin Franklin warned in 1787. Thomas Jefferson agreed with Madison. In a letter that he wrote to William Jarvis 2 years earlier, in 1820, Jefferson argued that the people must possess the discretion for self-government. Jefferson wrote to Jarvis, "If we ever doubt that the people possess the discretion they need for self-government, the best remedy is not to take self-government away from them, but to inform their discretion by education," unquote. In other words, education produces the knowledge which generates the wisdom and the power that enables self-government to work. That's what this republic depends on. If the public is in danger, it's because the people have ceased to know or care or want to know. To Jefferson, education is the surest way to correct what he called abuses of constitutional power, because the people are the only safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society. In a republic like ours, power, the ultimate power, has to be in the people. And in order to exercise it wisely, in order to acquire the discretion they need to assume the responsibilities of civic duty, the people must constantly seek to educate themselves. That's what this program is about. That's what this network is about. That's the way you understand what's happening on the national level. If you take this advice from Madison and Jefferson on education and on the acquisition of knowledge, go back to what we talked about in the first hour. Go back to Mulvaney's appearance on CNN yesterday with Jake Tapper. Mulvaney's statement that ethics and morality don't matter, only criminal evidence of criminal activity matters. Mulvaney is wrong when he denies that the House or the House committees have anything to do with issues of ethics and morality in government. He is wrong. The impeachment clause in the Constitution is a political activity, not a legal one. The reason the president is claiming total exoneration is because Barr's summary exonerates him of criminal behavior in relations with Russia before and during and after the election. But nothing in the Barr summary, and presumably nothing in the Mueller report on which Barr's summary is based, exonerates the president from unethical and immoral behavior with the Russians and with the long list of other violations of ethics and morality that Adam Schiff accuses the president of. Mulvaney went on CNN with Jake Tapper, and blatantly misinformed the general public about the responsibilities of the House of Representatives, about the responsibilities of the president to adhere to ethical and moral standards, or to be impeached if he doesn't. But his entire appearance was based on what he believed was the vulnerability and the ignorance of the American people to know for real what the Constitution says. In other words, what Mulvaney said on Jake Tapper's program yesterday speaks volumes to the attitude the administration has toward the general public. They believe they can get away with anything, that they can manipulate truth, that they can tell out and out falsehoods, that if they say it over again and over again, often enough, the public will believe that lies are in effect truth. That's what we're dealing with. This is what education enables us to see through. According to Madison and Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, the very survival of the republic depends on the willingness and the ability of the American people to regularly inform themselves so that they cannot be manipulated by ruthless politicians who are trying to twist the facts in order to benefit themselves. Education is the only way that government can be held responsible and accountable. It is the critical piece to the preservation of this republic. That's what's going on here. My conclusion on the Facebook posting that I put on here late yesterday, all of this seems to suggest that we continue to approach the education of our young people the wrong way. Does it not? Our increased reliance on online education and instruction makes a serious problem even worse. It gives us a faster, cheaper way to deliver content, but does little to promote the kind of engagement with that content needed for true education to really happen. Rather, it feeds the mistaken impression that we've improved education when in fact we've done no such thing. We have got to understand that information per se is not knowledge. It's not education. What people do with information is when education and knowledge happens. Knowledge is the product of people's engagement with content, with information. It's application of skills that they possess so that they can understand the information they've received. And when they truly understand it, they will recognize that Mick Mulvaney was lying to them yesterday. President Trump is lying to the American people when he talks about the Barr summary of the Mueller report totally exonerating him. It does not. It sure as hell does not exonerate him from unethical and immoral activity for which the impeachment clause of the Constitution proposes removal from office for such high crimes and misdemeanors. You don't have to be found guilty of a crime to be impeached. If you are found guilty of unethical and immoral behavior as President of the United States. That's what Trump doesn't want the American people to appreciate. That's what Mulvaney was trying to hide in his appearance on television yesterday. This is what real education is all about. It's the road to real understanding. Going back to grade school, it's the difference between being able to read words and being able to comprehend or understand what it is you're reading. Many of us have learned to read words. Too many of us don't read well enough to understand what it is we're reading. We find ourselves going back and rereading the same thing over and over again because we can't quite figure out exactly what it's saying. And the reason we can't is because our education system has never gone deeply enough, far enough, to teach us how to engage content rather than just memorize it by rote. We continue to educate that way. We use the latest technology through online instruction to deliver more and more information, more and more content. You can go online and find out anything by Googling it. You can gain access to any information you want. But what the hell does it mean? That's what educated people can understand. And that's why Franklin said that we've got a republic if we can keep it. And the way to keep it is through citizen civic responsibility. And that means education. That means analysis. It means asking questions. It means doubting what you're told, realizing that there's likely a political or personal agenda behind what people want us to believe. In order to get at the intent, the full intent of that agenda, we've got to be able to take what we're being told and engage it, massage it, interact with it, understand it, master it. Once we do, we are no longer vulnerable to manipulation by the untruthful and the dishonest. I mentioned that quote from Madison about popular government without popular information is either a farce or a tragedy, maybe both, is contained in this letter, excuse me, that Madison writes to William Barry on the 4th of August, 1822. And if you look at the entire letter, which I have in my hand, Madison opens by telling Barry that I received some days ago your letter of June 30th and the printed circular to which it refers. That particular letter and that particular circular is a request sent to Madison by William Barry asking for advice in getting universal education legislation through the Kentucky legislature. Madison says, quote, "The liberal appropriations made by the legislature of Kentucky for a general system of education cannot be too much applauded." At that point, then, Madison goes into the idea of popular government without popular information, et cetera, et cetera. That's the quote we've been dealing with. After that quote, Madison goes on and talks about the strong interest that he's had about what's going on in Kentucky and how proud he is of them. And he said, all of this, all that Kentucky has attained, the enlightened patriotism, which is now providing for the state a plan of education embracing every class of citizens and every grade and department of knowledge. No error, Madison said, is more certain than the one proceeding from a hasty, superficial view of a subject. That the people at large have no interest in the establishment of academies, colleges, and universities, because only a few, those not of the poorer classes, can obtain for their sons the advantages of superior education. Madison said he's proud of Kentucky for seeing through this. Everybody, every citizen has something to benefit by the creation of institutions committed to the goal of truly educating citizens to function in this republic. He goes on and refers back to the Virginia plan for general education put together by Thomas Jefferson, that which was called the general diffusion of knowledge. And Madison points out that in order for education, even higher education, to benefit everybody, all citizens, rich and poor alike, have to have access to education. And if the citizen themselves can't pay for that education, then the state has a responsibility to pay for the education of the brightest when they can't afford their own education. It's a brilliant letter. It's a brilliant statement of the values, the political necessity of education at all levels for everybody. Because like Jefferson, Madison believed that ultimately the republic rests on the entire population fulfilling its civic responsibilities to remain informed, to be educated. This is really important. I can't overemphasize it enough. We've reached the end of our program. It is right at the top of the hour. It is 3 p.m. in the East. For Bob Kincaid and Agnes and the folks at Head On, this is Bill Obrien thanking you and inviting you back for our program tomorrow, Tuesday, 2nd day of April in the year 2019. Thank you so very, very much for your continued support. I know Bob and Agnes appreciate it. So do I. Thank you.